Arcadian was released in theaters on April 12th, and with it being co-produced or co-distributed by Shudder, it should eventually end up on their platform. To summarize the movie, a father named Paul and his two boys, Joseph and Thomas, live in a rural area of an unnamed part of the country. From what we're told and shown, the world has been decimated by these contortionate-looking, crazy, jawed monsters that thankfully only come out at night. And while humanity has built up some kind of defense against it, it seems like it has probably overwhelmed them more and more to the point where we're not outright told humanity's at extinction levels, but we are pushed to think that it has definitely lowered the population significantly. But for the most part, Paul and his kids have their boarded up windows, boarded up doors. In the daytime, Thomas is able to run off to a nearby farm and flirt with a girl that he likes. And as for Joseph, he is much more studious than his brother, so he's often reading, researching bugs and also the monsters as best as he can. And that's the life he carves out for himself. But things get very complicated when the monsters realize that there's more ways to enter a home than just doors or windows, and that is going to be what pushes this family and the nearby farm's family to figure out a different way to survive the night. So getting to the review portion, the best thing about this movie is how the monsters look, and that's because they give this almost Resident Evil kind of vibe, for whether it's when they combine together and they make this wheel that looks strange and is what triggers a Resident Evil comparison, or just when you see them moving around in their weird contortionist bodies that look like spiders, hence the name of the movie, and then their jaws, which look like tongues as they open and close, and it's very creepy. And not like nightmare-inducing creepy in some ways. At least I didn't have a nightmare after watching this movie last night, but it's definitely the kind of monster that I don't necessarily need a franchise to see again. But as for like notable monsters, if there was ever to be such a list, I would say this deserves at least a special mention. But while that's the highlight, everything else with this movie is pretty much passable. In terms of world building, you don't really get to know what happened. Charlotte, who is Thomas's little girlfriend, she plays a game with him in which they're supposed to give like a minute or some amount of seconds to explain how the world ended in their minds. And while she gives a theory that makes sense, is not presented as canon. So whether or not some alien monster came to Earth, something mutated or whatever, you do not know. All you know is that this thing kills indiscriminately at night. And then as for what the world is like outside of Paul's farm and the farm that Charlotte grows up on with her family, it's hard to say. The movie begins, and you see this in the trailer, where there's some type of battle going on in the city, but you don't get context. You don't know if humanity's fighting each other. You don't know if they're fighting monsters. Maybe like they found one of the monsters' nests in the middle of the day and that's what they're fighting. It's hard to say. So all you get is Paul's farm and his kids, the farm that Charlotte goes up on with the people who live there, and unfortunately you don't really get much out of either side to make it so that even if the world is kind of boring and dry, at least the people compensate, right? No, everybody is very dull. Paul, you can recognize, is all about survival. So he's just trying to follow these two kids that he found one day, teach them all the skills they need so that they can outlive him. That's about it. Yes, Thomas might be somebody who's a bit more extroverted than his introverted brother Joseph, but that doesn't mean that he's the most interesting character around. And even if you want to throw Charlotte in there in terms of a love interest, she doesn't necessarily light him up, and then as an individual, I don't think she necessarily evolves beyond being his crush. Yes, it's shown that she grew up in a much better situation than him, comes from a place where medicine is not the scarce thing, but while you see her reading like Joseph reads, you don't get like a true sense of who she is in a way that makes you feel connected to her. Or in terms of any character, feel like you're invested to the point where you fear the possibility of one of these monsters killing them, eating them, or whatever. They're basically just fodder for you to see these monsters get freaked out a little bit and then be sent on your way. Which is why overall, while we do give props to whoever made the monster, which I don't even think has a name, when it comes to world building, character development, Arcadian doesn't give you anything to really latch on to. So pretty much you're just watching this to see these monsters hurt, harm, kill, and be killed.